The morning bells rang across the mountain, a deep bronze toll that rolled along the eaves and sank into the stone courts. The sound did not lift the spirit. It drove men and women to their feet. For most, it called them to lessons and meditation. For Liang and the other outer disciples, it meant buckets and brooms and the ache in the shoulders that began before the first task was even halfway done. Water sloshed against his shins as he climbed the steps with 2 brimming pails. The cold soaked through the cloth at once and bit into the skin as if the mountain wished to lay claim to his bones. A line of outer disciples trudged along the stair behind him, backs bent beneath bundles of split wood and sacks of tools and stone slabs for patching a broken curb. Morning light touched the ridges above and made a thin line of fire along their spines. Sweat already darkened the backs of their robes. On the upper walkway, inner disciples strode with the lightness of people who begin the day with breath work rather than labor. Their robes were spotless. Their hair was bound with ribbons that never seemed to slip. Their voices drifted down in easy talk about stances they had tried the night before, about a small adjustment in the wrist that lent a strike real bite, about a teacher who finally judged a sequence passable. The scent of spirit ginseng floated in a soft ribbon from a satchel one of them carried. Liang knew the smell at once. It set heat into the chest when swallowed and smoothed the flow of qi like oil poured over a rough hinge. He had read about it in the library. He had never held it. He paused at the well to set the pails down and shake life back into his hands. The wooden handles had pressed grooves into his palms. Breath steamed from his mouth in the crisp air and broke apart as it rose. Beside him, Wu Sen shifted his load of wood with a grunt. Wu had arms like beams and the patience of a man who had always been given the heaviest end of the pole and carried it without complaint until today. 3 months, Wu said under his breath, and I have not held a spirit stone that was mine. I have scrubbed stones that hold more qi than I can gather in a week. Those silk-robed birds bathe in elixir steam as if it were well water. Someone behind them muttered a warning. The stewards have ears like cats. They already know, Wu said louder, and spat into the dusty corner where weeds dared to live. We bleed and they laugh. Whispering will not mend a cut. Liang did not answer. He watched the inner disciples cross the sunlit path above. The one with the herb satchel glanced down, not at the men with pails, but at the stone where their footsteps had wet the stair. Liang closed his fingers around the handle until the knots of wood pressed into bone. He willed his face to stillness and lifted the pails again. The path to the cistern seemed longer than it had yesterday. The morning ran itself ragged with errands. The outer disciples skinned moss from shaded stones, laid new gravel where mud had swallowed it, hauled waste to the garden rows at the south slope where the sect coaxed herbs out of stingy soil. By the time the sun rose clear of the ridge, a steward sent them to the Jade Court to clean for training. The Jade Court was a place of smooth floors and shadowed pillars where inner disciples liked to practice when the light slanted just so. Polishing that floor to a mirror was a task that demanded time and knees that did not mind speaking to stone. Liang knelt with a cloth and worked the same ring over and over until a warped cloud came clear there. The air smelled of oil and old sweat and incense ash. When he had finished the rack of practice blades, the first inner disciples came in laughing, heads bent together as people do who have never had to look over their shoulder while they speak. Zhao Ren was among them. He had the kind of smile that had learned the shape of other people's pain and found it a reasonable decoration. He saw Liang at once, as if he had come to the court for that reason. Ah, he said, the bucket carrier stands straight when no one is watching. His friends laughed as if they had rehearsed the line. A tall inner disciple with a long sharp nose and a prideful way of holding his chin looked Wu Sen up and down. The broom in Wu's hands had left straw marks across his palms. The tall disciple flicked a foot and knocked the broom away. Wu stumbled. Laughter rang along the pillars. On your knees, Zhao said in a tone that carried easily. Show respect to those above you. Shame colored Wu's face to the ears. He looked to the side, then to the ground, then at his hands that had never learned how to ask for mercy. Outer disciples lowered their heads. No one moved. No one meant to risk drawing the eye of a boy who had made a sport of cutting pride to ribbons. Liang set the cloth on the rack. The words came without hurry, but they did not tremble. Respect is earned, not forced. Laughter died as if a wind had gone out. The silence that followed had a keen edge. Zhao turned his head as a cat turns at a sound that promises meat. You would lecture me, he said, outer trash. Liang held his ground. His ribs remembered Zhao's fists and the weeks after when breathing had required more thought than he had ever wanted to give it. His hands remembered the weight of practice stakes. His belly remembered the cold knot of hunger after long days. He remembered the ember that had taken up a small throne in his dantian and the way it answered when he breathed. He did not bow. The tall disciple stepped forward. Light gathered in his palm like water that had decided to become a blade. Kneel or I will make you kneel. Liang's weight shifted from heel to ball and back again. He kept his hands low. If the strike came, he would slip to the side and take the cut where muscle could bear it. He had already weighed the price of staying upright. A cough sounded in the shadow of the far colonnade. An elder emerged with the slow unhurried steps of a man who has read enough scrolls to know how a day will end even before breakfast. Elder Shen, one of the keepers of the library. His beard moved in the wind like spill water over rock. Eyes that always seemed to have a bit of ink on the corners took in the scene and stopped on Liang's face the way a hand stops on a page where the script is new. What is this noise? Shen said, and his voice did not have to rise to fill the court. Zhao bowed at once. He bent his head in the manner of men who respect a title while hating a man. Merely instruction in proper behavior, elder. Shen's eyes thinned. Respect beaten into a body is not respect. It is fear. And fear is not strength. If you want to prove strength, choose a trial that weighs more than a broom. Zhao's jaw worked as if he ground thorns between his teeth. He bowed deeper. As you say, elder. Shen turned to Liang and looked without hurry, as if counting breath. You are bold, he said. Boldness can lift a man from where he stands, but it can bury him faster. The ground you walk is not kind to feet that run. Liang bowed his head, just enough to show he could be taught. I seek fairness, elder. Shen's mouth quirked into a shape that might be a smile if seen from a distance. Fairness is a luxury, he said. Remember that while you are still hungry for it. He turned and went away, and the whisper of cloth said more than his last words had said. The court did not relax. Zhao's eyes kept to Liang like a brand. Wu Sen collected his broom and held it without looking at anyone. The tall disciple flexed his hand and made the light go out, which does not mean the wish to use it went out with it. By evening the story had already acquired extra teeth and claws. In the outer dorms people spoke in low voices and then in lower voices when a steward walked by. In the mess hall bowls knocked against wood and the porridge wore its usual thin gray face. Wu sat with Liang and spoke with his head tilted so the words stayed under the steam. They will come for you now, he said. You know that. The inner boys will not like that you let a sentence stand upright in front of them. They came for me long ago, Liang said. I am still here. This changes nothing. It changes everything, Wu said, and his eyes slid to the right and then to the door and then back again. Those who carry water watched you. Some of them could not stop watching. You gave them a picture they had not yet been able to imagine. Those above will make sure the picture is torn. 2 inner disciples entered to take food to their rooms. Conversation fell like a dropped plate that no one dared lift. Backs straightened without anyone ordering it. Heads lowered out of habit learned in lean years. A few faces looked toward Liang through the steam. Expectation fledged there. The sight of it weighed more than water. He felt that weight settle on his shoulders and he did not shrug it off. His own quarrel with Zhao had burned like a coal in the ribs since their first meeting. Now he understood that other people had found their hands cold and had come near to warm them. The night stretched thin. Liang sat cross-legged in the narrow room that barely held a bed and a low table. He drew breath in long strokes and tried to lay it down along the shape the hundredfold path described in the lines of his memory. Patience, resilience, a slow climb rather than a leap. Yet each day set him deeper into the crack between inner and outer, as if the path did not run over the sect but through it. He tried to follow the thread he had chosen and found hooks in it. Zhao's face rose behind his eyes. Elder Shen's look that had not judged and had not saved. The waiting gazes in the hall. The ember in his dantian pulsed in a cadence that did not match the bells. It answered something in him that had already decided. Voices drifted through the windows of the dorms like smoke that would not be trapped. People argued in whispers about whether any bridge could ever span the space between the pavilions where inner disciples learned to fly and the yards where outer disciples learned to carry. Someone said it had always been this way. Someone else said always is a word people use when they are afraid to name who chose. Liang opened his eyes to the dark. His chest felt full and empty at once. He had begun by wanting strength for himself. He now wanted strength that made room for others to breathe. A sect that had forgotten how to do that had traded a piece of its soul for comfort. Balance would not return without struggle. He did not know yet if he was the one to pay the price for it. He did know someone would. Morning came with the taste of iron on the air, an omen no one admitted to seeing. Tasks piled in tidy lines. Liang took them one by one without complaint and without hurry. He made himself small on purpose, which is not the same as being cowed. When he finished sweeping a side court he drifted to the laundry cistern to rinse the grit from his sleeves. Wu joined him with a crate of chipped bowls. "You should not walk alone for a time," Wu said as if speaking about the weather. "I will be careful," Liang said. "Careful is a word the hurt like to hear after the hurting," Wu said. Still, he stayed, as if a quiet body near another quiet body could turn aside eyes that looked for excuses. By noon a steward sent the outer disciples to carry buckets to the incense hall. The stone steps there were steep and narrow. Liang took them in steady runs and placed each pail on the shelf with the care of a man placing a sleeping child. On the third trip down he found his path blocked by the tall inner disciple with the long nose. Two others stood at his back. The tall one had a polite smile on his face. "You made a speech yesterday," he said. "I came to hear another." Liang set the buckets down with enough care that water did not splash. "I do not have one ready," he said. "A pity," the tall boy said. "We have so little entertainment." A steward's shadow moved around the corner beyond the incense hall door. The tall boy glanced that way and then back, and his hand closed on the handle of the bucket. He lifted it and tipped it. Water ran over Liang's feet and into his sandals and the cold pierced up the bones. A drop clung to the boy's knuckle. He flicked it. "Try to keep your place dry," he said. Liang looked at the stone between his feet and then up at the boy's face. The ember in his belly did not leap. "If you want us to keep making more stories like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Azure Inkblade." Now, back to the chapter. It settled. He picked up the bucket and carried it past them and did not speak. The boy's eyes followed him with the disappointment of a man whose bait has not been taken. Wu met him at the foot of the stair and swore when he saw the wet cloth around Liang's ankles. "They think you will run at any tug now," Wu said. "Good. Let them pull at air." Near sunset the outer disciples were sent to wipe down the jade court again. Liang dreaded it less than he expected. Weariness had numbed the edge of dread. He worked his corner where a pillar met the floor and kept his attention on the 3-finger width of stone that served as his entire world for the length of a cloth stroke. He heard the inner disciples enter by their change in stride. He did not look up. Zhao Ren's voice arrived before Zhao did, as always. "There is our bold one," he said, and the joke had already been told twice before he finished the sentence. The tall boy moved a broom with the side of his foot and it clattered along the floor to stop at Liang's knee. "On your feet," Zhao said. Liang stood. His body did not want to. It did it anyway. He met Zhao's gaze. The court breathed in. "Shall we give you a chance to earn that line you like to say?" Zhao said, "All ease now." "Respect is earned," you said. "Earn mine." "Name the trial," Liang said. Zhao's eyes brightened. The game had come to him. He lifted a practice spear from the rack and waited. "Tomorrow at noon, the Jade Court. 3 sequences of spear form against my palm. You will not strike my face. You will not draw blood. You will not fall. If you do, you will kneel at the end and you will say you were wrong. If you stand through all 3, I will bow to you once. That is what you want, is it not?" A murmur moved along the pillars. The trial sounded fair in the way traps sound fair. Zhao would be the one without a weapon. Teachers often took that role with juniors. The risk seemed to lie with him. Liang knew better. Spears made men commit. Open hands made men wait and choose. He had watched instructor CAI in that role. Zhao was not CAI. But Zhao was quick and mean and used to winning. "I accept," Liang said. "Of course you do," Zhao said with a soft laugh. He turned the spear in his hand and placed it back on the rack with a flourish that made it look like a friend rather than wood. The tall boy dipped his head as if the matter bored him now and strode away. The others followed in a scent of ginseng and smugness. Wu came to Liang's side and spoke low. "You should have refused. There is no fairness in a trial named by a man who wants a picture of you kneeling." "If I refuse, they will make a different picture," Liang said. "They will paint me small." The court already saw the lines. "Better to choose how I stand in the frame." Wu stared at him and shook his head and then grinned in a way that put strength back into the mouth. "I will be there," he said, as if that could change anything at all, and then added, "Sometimes it does." Night crept in with a pale wind. Liang walked the boundary of the Jade Court after the lamps were snuffed and laid his palm on the stone to feel the old chill of the rock answer his warmth. He imagined the steps across the floor the next day, the angle of the spear haft, the soft places where a palm could steal breath, the breaks in Zhao's stance when anger surged. He did not pretend that training would turn his hands into a master's hands in a night. He asked only for his breath to find its root and for his feet to remember ground. He slept a little. He woke before the bell. He moved through stances in the empty courtyard where even birds had not begun to gossip. The spear familiar in his grip, then strange, then familiar again. He practiced the first sequence so slowly the form might have fallen asleep watching him. He sped it only when the sun licked the lip of the eastern ridge. Noon found the court full. Word had walked faster than any steward. Outer disciples crowded along the pillars, shoulders pressed to stone as if to borrow its apparent calm. Inner disciples stood with arms folded, some with smiles that wished the day would give them a story to repeat at supper. Instructors were scarce. They did not bless this, but they did not forbid it. Elder Shen appeared near the shadow of a side door and leaned as if the stone held up more than his back. He did not speak. Zhao walked to the center with the unhurried purpose of a man who knows the ending and plans to savor it. Liang took the spear from the rack and felt the weight tell his palm the long story of wood that had been tree once and wanted to be tree again. He stepped to the mark. They did not bow. The court would have liked a bow. The court did not get it. "Begin," someone murmured when no one with a title said the word. Liang set the point low and his rear foot heavy. Zhao lifted his hands open and relaxed, palm up, palm down, the casual arrogance of a man who believes fate prefers him. Liang inhaled and let the spear carry that breath out as the point rose in the first cutting arc of the sequence. Zhao slid to the side and touched the haft with 2 fingers. The spear's path bent and kept going. Liang did not fight the bend. He flowed with it and turned it into the second motion. Zhao let the palm at his side float up and pressed for the smallest moment against the haft. The spear slowed. Liang nudged it forward with his back foot and found speed again. The court drew its first real breath. The spear whispered. Zhao's palm flashed and tapped the shaft near the head. If Liang had been a heartbeat late, it would have been a slap to the knuckles that numbed the hand. He was not late. He was barely on time. The sequence ended with a thrust to the air, 3 fingers to the side of Zhao's ear. The point never strayed close enough to cause a cut. That had been part of the bargain. The crowd made a sound that did not know whether it wanted to be a cheer or a groan. Zhao smiled without warmth. Again, Zhao said. Liang began the second sequence and knew at once that Zhao would press more. The palm that had floated now hunted. It sought the places on the haft that robbed leverage, that took the spear from weapon to long stick in a boy's toy chest. Liang let the spear be heavy in his hands for a breath and then light, and that shift saved him once when Zhao tried to wrench the point up. Liang took the motion and turned it into a high sweep that ended in a low cut. Zhao had to pivot hard to keep his balance. His heel scuffed the stone. A small sound from the inner crowd said they had seen a man they admired need to correct more than he had intended to. Zhao bared his teeth in a smile that had little joy in it. He slapped the haft hard enough to sting Liang's palms. Liang did not let go. The sting became heat and the heat became focus. He moved through the end of the second sequence with his breath in his back and the spear listened to him to the end and not to Zhao. The court murmured in a different tone now. The outer disciples stood taller by a finger. The inner disciples altered their faces into neutrality, the way people do when they fear their eyes will tell the truth. Zhao's voice was soft. Once more. Liang lifted the spear and began the third sequence that asked the most from the legs. His thighs burned. Sweat ran down his spine in a fine thread. Zhao attacked the haft as if he meant to break it. He did not need to. He only needed to break the rhythm. Liang dug his foot into the memory of the floor and set the butt of the spear down for a breath and used that rootedness to keep the arc true. Zhao pressed close and Liang had to choose whether to keep the point away from flesh or to save his hands from a cut. He chose to save the bargain. He let the point swing wide from Zhao's cheek by the width of 2 fingers. Zhao's palm struck the shaft near the butt and sent it ringing along its length. Liang's teeth hurt from the vibration. He pushed through to the last thrust and held it steady in the air by Zhao's shoulder. Silence held. The spear stopped moving. Liang's hands shook when he lowered it. He had kept all 3 sequences. He had not cut skin. He had not fallen. Zhao's chest rose and fell once. He did not speak at once. He looked at Liang's hands, then at the point of the spear, then into Liang's eyes where he had not often looked. Something like calculation moved there and then made way for something like respect that did not want to be seen. He bowed the slightest bow a man could make and have it still be called a bow. A murmur swept the court as something that had felt impossible a week ago happened in front of watchful pillars. Do not waste that, Elder Shen said, and his voice traveled without needing to be loud. He was speaking to Zhao and to Liang and to every person with a rank and every person without one. Respect given by bargain holds longer than respect taken by fear. Remember it. Zhao straightened. There was anger in him. There was also the memory of his own heel scuffing the stone and his own palm failing once to turn a spear. He took that memory with him when he left. The tall disciple with the long nose did not laugh as he had promised himself he would. He stared too long at Liang as if he wanted to find the trick and break it. Wu Sen reached Liang first and clapped his shoulder with a heavy hand that knew how to share weight. The others gathered in a wave that stopped just short of touching. They did not want to steal strength by laying hands on it. They wanted to see it up close so they could believe it would still be there when they needed it in their minds later. Liang leaned the spear back on the rack and felt the wood settle with relief. He breathed and the ember in his belly answered with the calm of a coal that knows it can catch if wind asks it to. He did not feel triumph. He felt a space open. A single breath's worth. It was enough to slip through. By evening the story had grown extra branches. People told it as if the spear had sung. People told it as if Zhao had nearly lost his footing. People told it as if Elder Shen had smiled. People told it as if the court itself had listened. In the mess hall bowls clinked with a different note. Heads did not lower as fast when a pair of inner disciples entered. One of those inner boys glanced at Liang and then away and pretended he had not. It was a small thing. It was a thing. Wu ate with an appetite that had forgotten fear for a moment. He still chewed hard, but it was food now and not bitterness. This does not end anything, he said, his mouth full, but it begins something I can carry in my pocket when I am told to kneel. It ends nothing, Liang agreed. The path from the dorms to the pavilions did not shorten because a boy held a spear. But the path had a new stone in it that had not been there yesterday. Night fell. The wall kept its watch. On a high eave a small shape sat down for a time and looked out over the courts. Liang did not see it. He did not need to. He felt the way the ember in him made a soft answering beat that had little to do with triumph and everything to do with decision. He lay down in a room still too small for his breath and closed his eyes and saw the faces in the mess hall, the way a few had looked at him and then at their bowls and then at the pavilion roofs. The sect had always balanced itself on the backs of the ones who brought water to the fire. It would not change because of a single exchange in a court. It might change because people began to imagine something else when they closed their eyes at night. Balance without struggle is a word for stories told to children so they will sleep. Liang understood that now. If balance ever came to this mountain, it would arrive with bruises. It would wear sweat. It would cost. He did not yet know if he would be the one to pay the largest coin. He did know he would not refuse to pay what he had. The bells did not ring that night. The silence belonged to men and women too tired to dream and to a wall that practiced not breaking. In the dark, voices rose and fell from the dorms in waves that never quite became a storm. Someone laughed once, quick and shocked by itself, and then covered the sound with a cough. In his sleep Liang turned on his mat and the ember below his navel glowed and then dimmed and then glowed again, in time not with bells, not with steps, but with a pulse that promised to wait until he was ready to put his weight on it.